A while back, I made a video about why you should be playing Pioneer, one of my personal favorite formats in all of Magic. Point by point, I carefully made the case for why Pioneer should be your go-to 60-card format, whether you're a Commander player looking to branch out, or a Magic veteran looking for a return to a more classic style of gameplay. I think that video turned out quite well, and the reception was fairly positive, but I have a confession to make. For most of that video, I was a little bit less than honest with you, intentionally drawing favorable comparisons between Pioneer and other formats like Standard and Modern, while shying away from comparisons to Pauper. And that's in large part because as much as I love Pioneer, once you bring Pauper into the conversation, it just gets a lot more difficult to make the case for playing any other 60-card format. Let's talk about why. For those that don't know already, Pauper is a 60-card format with a very simple premise. It's an eternal format with no rotations where any card printed at common is legal. But as it turns out, common cards are, by definition, common, and as a result, Pauper has a truly gargantuan card pool, featuring a surprisingly wide variety of staples from other formats, as well as a very large pool of cards only viable in Pauper's unique meta. This means that whether you're a newer Commander player with a stack of commons from the latest sets, or a fossil with a concerning amount of bulk from the Urza's block in your closet, you're pretty likely to find out that you already own a surprising amount of Pauper viable cards without spending a single cent. That's not to say that you'll be out a lot of money if you don't already own the cards you need, because if Pauper had to be described in one word, that word would be cheap. The most expensive Pauper decks available still cost less than most budget options in other formats, and several of my favorite Pauper decks I personally own cost me maybe $10 to $15 to build from scratch. This low price point is Pauper's greatest strength, but I do suspect that it feeds into one of the biggest misconceptions holding the format back. You see, it's very easy to look at a common-only format played primarily with extremely cheap cards, and make the assumption that the reason the format is so cheap and the meta is so diverse is because Pauper is just a bunch of people playing baby's first Magic format, a low power level format primarily populated by people playing random piles of bulk commons that just lack the cohesion and strength of other formats. But this really couldn't be further from the truth. Pauper's extremely healthy metagame isn't just functional, it's powerful and diverse, with a wide variety of Pauper decks capable of absolutely steamrolling most Standard and Pioneer decks, and even holding their own in some modern matchups. Of course, there are some sacrifices associated with playing only commons. While many decks are full of the complex and nuanced interactions you would expect from a fully fleshed out format, individual cards do tend to be simpler across the board, since Wizards of the Coast typically reserves especially complex or unique effects for higher rarities. Planeswalkers also have never been printed in common, and as a result are entirely absent from the format. And the best Magic card of all time, Siege Rhino, is regrettably unavailable, although I have found Grey Merchant to be a worthy substitute in a pinch. Of course, it's very hard to overstate what a drawback it is to not have access to the greatest Magic card ever printed, Siege Rhino, but in exchange, the Pauper meta features a variety of archetypes not present in Pioneer or in any recent Standard rotation, as well as plenty of opportunity to disrupt the meta with homebrews without breaking the bank. Despite all of these points in favor of Pauper, it does remain a comparatively unpopular format. As I mentioned earlier, there's definitely a misconception as to the competitiveness and strength of the format, and Wizards, let's be honest, has little incentive to promote Pauper over other formats, since it's much too cheap to make them any money. Homebrews often cost the same amount as a couple of packs, meta decks cost less than a single copy of the One Ring, and for the price of a single modern deck, you could buy the entirety of the Tier 1 Pauper meta and not spend any more money for years. Sideboards included, by the way. A format where the most expensive card in your deck is often no more than $1 or $2, it just isn't going to sell Wizards any packs. So the focus remains on the formats that drive profit. But whether you're a competitively minded player who is just sick of the meta in their format of choice, a limited player with piles of commons you don't quite know what to do with, or a commander pod that just doesn't have time for another commander game, you simply can't go wrong adding Pauper to the rotation. You'll probably be surprised at how deep, nuanced, and fun the gameplay is, and let's be honest, even if you're not, it's less of a financial hit than the money that you burnt last time you took a chance on a collector pack.